Hi, everyone. Welcome to JerseyCAN's webinar on accelerating student learning. We will get started in a few minutes. Welcome to everyone who's still coming in. Welcome to JerseyCAN's webinar on accelerating student learning. We're going to get started in about one more minute. All right. Well, we are going to get started. Once again, welcome to JerseyCAN's webinar on accelerating student learning. I'm your moderator, Chelsea Collins. Thank you so much for being here. I am the 2016 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year. I'm an instructional coach, a state and national learning consultant, and like many of you, I'm a lifelong learner. That's why I'm so excited for this opportunity to learn with you tonight, specifically about the great resources that JerseyCAN has made available for parents, educators, and district leaders, and to also hear from an incredible panel of experts around this really important topic of accelerating student learning. So as we go through sort of the run of show, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We will have some time at the end for Q&A for the panelists, and we would definitely love to field some of the questions in the chat. So thank you. So throughout the pandemic, JerseyCAN has met with school leaders, teachers, and families to look at student learning data and to understand how districts are accelerating forward. Today's webinar is going to focus on two areas. First, JerseyCAN is going to discuss resources that they've made available for parents, educators, and districts to assist in accelerating student learning. This includes their Kids Can't Wait platform, which provides families with tools that they can use to support their children academically this school year, and their framework to accelerate student learning, which showcases evidence-based best practices that are currently being implemented in New Jersey schools and across the state. The second part of today's webinar will consist of a panel discussion from education experts who are leading in their respective areas. I'm confident that the information and perspectives shared with you on the webinar tonight will be useful as you continue to make a difference for kids across the state here in New Jersey. So thank you again so much for taking the time to be on with us tonight. So jumping right in, first, we're going to hear from Jean Ellen Duffy, and Jean Ellen is the Senior Advisor and Founding Executive Director of JerseyCAN. Jane Ellen, can you start by walking us through the Kids Can't Wait campaign and how the project originated here at JerseyCAN?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chelsea. And thank you everyone for joining. We're so excited to have you. As Chelsea mentioned, we spent a lot of time over this past year doing a lot of research and reaching out to the fields and talking with many of the panelists you're going to talk to today to hear what they're doing in terms of best practices in their districts and schools. And we had such a wealth of information. We wanted to take that and prepare it in a way that could be useful for parents, Also recognizing that this fall with back to school is just such a critically important time for so many kids across the state. This is the first time going back to school full time, in person. And so we felt we wanted to prepare this information so that we could really empower parents and support parents in this very crucial time. So we created a whole new microsite called cantwait.jerseycan.org. And we pulled together some of the very best resources that we found over the past year into this one website. So in particular, one of the things we put together is like a checklist for parents. Again, recognizing that the parents have a lot of questions right now, a lot of concerns ranging from health and safety to student social and emotional well-being, and also questions about how their children are doing. How are they doing in terms of their academic needs? And so we really tried to, and all in the name of supporting parents, we tried to put together this package of questions, checklist of questions that parents can raise with their child's teacher or with the principal or other administrators in the school, just even in advance of parent-teacher conferences, so that parents can get information about how their children are doing. We also, on this new microsite, we created a link to the case study project and framework project that Chelsea mentioned earlier. This was a project that we did over the course of this past year to really look at the national best practices and the local best practices, where folks are using, school leaders and district leaders are using evidence-based best practices to address students' needs. And you're going to hear in detail from the folks who led this work today. So I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but I did want to share with you all this work is summarized on the cantwait.jerseycan.org site, as well as on the JerseyCAN site as well too. And then lastly, on this microsite, we curated resources for parents. So above and beyond the checklist and above and beyond the case studies, we know that parents are so hungry for information. We know this from polls we've done and from other research we've done and just in the work that we do on an ongoing basis. And so we curated this set of tools so that parents who want to further get involved and reach out to their child's teacher or engage in some like readiness checks can do that with some of the resources that we've curated here. So really excited about this. We're going to be adding to this website over time, and it can also be accessed from the JerseyCAN website. I'm going to stop there because what I really want to do is pivot so you can hear from the folks in the field who made all of this great work happen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jane Ellen, for walking us through the resources. So important to have those resources in the hands of families to work with schools and districts as partners. So thank you for walking us through those. And I agree. I can't wait to hear from the education leaders we have on the call here today. So let's take a minute and welcome them. So joining us on our panel today, we have Kimberly Harrington Marcus. Many of you recognize and know Kimberly as being the Commissioner of Education here in New Jersey. She currently is the Chief Education Officer for the Education Research and Development Institute. So welcome, Kimberly. It's so great to have you here with us today. Dr. Jamara Mills, he's the Chief Academic Officer for College Achieve Patterson. Welcome, Dr. Mills. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Jennifer Johnson Floyd is a district leader and educator in Collingswood School District. So Jennifer, welcome. Thank you so much for being on tonight. Chiffon Rushford, she's the Chief Core Officer at Great Oaks Legacy Charter School. Chiffon, welcome. And then Jamila Mohammed, the CEO of Parent Impact and NJ Delegate of National Parents Union. Jamila, welcome. Thank you so much for being on with us tonight. Thank you, for in advance to the panel for being here, sharing your expertise, your insights, your solutions around this important topic of accelerating student learning. It's like meeting celebrities because if you look at on JerseyCAN's site, it's just, their videos and the case studies are so useful. So the first time I got to meet this panel, I was so excited to kind of meet them in person. So getting started, the pandemic has accelerated us all into using technology in new ways. Many districts have been thoughtfully using technology as a vehicle to better connect with families. Shafan, I'd love to start with you. We'd love to hear how Great Oaks has used technology to ensure that communication between caregivers and educators is able to stay consistent throughout the pandemic.
Sure. Good afternoon. And I just really want to say thank you to the JerseyCAN team for inviting me to share more about Great Oaks Legacy Charter School and what we're doing. I'll start by saying really since the inception of our school, parent and family engagement is one of our top priorities. And as you know, it takes a village to support scholars, and that village has to be built on a trusting relationships. So one of the things we've kept constant is our weekly touch point with families. And this is typically a phone call once a week, primarily made by our AmeriCorps fellows who provide small group tutoring in grades 3 through 10, as well as many of our teachers. And this phone call is not just about sharing updates or giving updates about how students are doing, but oftentimes that one phone call goes down a road of discovery. And so whether that's answering questions about what does it mean to be safe coming back to school, especially this time of the school year. We find out that some of our families may need additional support, whether that's access to food pantries, where to go for social services. And we've been able to do that. And we know and we believe that it's because of this weekly touch point, because of the relationships we've developed with our families, that we find out a lot about what our families need, how they could support our students, how we can collaborate together. And this is a true testament to the work that our teachers, our leaders, and our fellows are doing on the ground every day. We quickly had to adjust to the constraints of the pandemic. And so even though we're doing this weekly phone call, what was once, an open door policy and parents coming in for in-person meetings, we had to shift to this new world of technology. So meeting over Zoom or Google Meet. And what we found is that our parents are pretty much fans of this technology and having this FaceTime with school leaders and fellows. And so especially when I think about the families who have to juggle such a busy schedule, they're so grateful for the convenience of like, no, I have a break at work and let me just log into this Zoom meeting. And so we've been able to still keep that connection and making adjustments. And one thing I'll point out that's a new initiative. And so our PE teacher, Mr. Bernard, saw a need to create a virtual safe space for our families. And so what he's doing is having monthly meetings with parents, and they talk about things related to health and wellness and better ways to support their scholars. But they're also taking these hiking tours and these walking tours in the area. And I just think as educators, we just have to think outside the box. And how do we continue to engage families and really keep this trust and partnership going, especially because a lot of families have concerns about, being back during a pandemic.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I love how you hit on the technology and the social emotional learning pieces for families and students. It sounds like you're really able to leverage that technology to be convenient for families, to your point, and to be consistent, which sounds incredible. That's happening at Great Oaks. Thank you so much, Shafan. Dr. Mills, I know you've also been able to use technology in big ways to impact the way that you've responded and continue to engage with families and initiatives. Could you talk a little bit about some of the work you're leading as well?
Yes. I think that one of the things that the pandemic has allowed for us to actually bring to the forefront is engagement with families. Oftentimes, parents are not able to attend every after school meeting, every after school event, or even kind of participate in fellowship amongst each other in mass amounts. When we're servicing, over 1,200 families, that's a lot of parents. And so one of the things that the pandemic allowed for us is to create a space called Parent University. And we initially created it to support moms and dads and grandmoms and grandparents that are raising young children to be able to actually support their students with the work from home. They became pseudo substitute teachers or teachers' aides when the pandemic hit. And we wanted them to understand how to navigate the online or virtual curriculum that we were offering. And so the Parent University kicked off as us training families on how to use Google, how to use Google Suite, how to use Chromebook, how to troubleshoot it, how to access our math curriculum, how to access our literacy curriculum, and even Google Classroom. Where could they find assignments, missing assignments? Because students are very creative in the ways in which they can be done, and you can't figure out that they haven't done their work. And what that actually turned into was an actual space for us to not only help them be better parents and educating their children, but also learning skills to educate themselves. And so we're still continuing the Parent University. We have increased participation because of this ability to connect virtually as often as possible, and they not need to travel anywhere. And now we're actually offering them financial literacy courses. We're offering them opportunities to partnership with Passaic County Community College for those who are English language learners. So there's a slew of courses that they're now able to participate in just because of the sad piece or the extenuating circumstances of the pandemic did birth some amazing opportunities for us and our families here in Patterson.
Great. And I love how you're thinking about ways that they're not only supporting their own scholar, their own child, but then also, to your point, that they're really building their own skill sets and creating those connections with the community college is incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Mills. That sounds great. In the same way that families are seeking ongoing engagement from schools, they want to know that teachers are meeting the individualized needs of their child. Personalized learning is not a new concept for educators, but it's certainly gotten some more attention during the pandemic. Kimberly, you have such a wide range of experiences from, both the state level, the district level, and now as a national leader. We'd love to hear you talk through your experiences with personalized learning plans and what advice you have for districts as they're looking at this method to accelerate student learning.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chelsea. It's really an honor to be here and always to have interaction and be a part of the JerseyCAN team. So thank you for having me. And as you just heard, both Shafan and Jamar share about the importance of rich partnerships as we support student success. And so thinking about personalized learning, I think many times, and many people who know me know that I have a strong platform around student engagement and student voice. And I think many times our students of all ages feel like education is something that's sort of done to them, or adults do a lot of the deciding. And so when we think about personalized learning plans, it's really important that the students themselves are partners in this work, and that they really feel like they have an ownership component of their own learning. It's how we help to transition them from an external locus of control, where they feel like things are coming from the outside and that's what their decisions are hinged upon, and really empowering them to dig deep into that internal locus of control, which helps them with decision making of all kinds. So going back to my years as the Commissioner of Education, I was fortunate to get to work with lots of different districts and leaders across the country, similar to your Teacher of the Year work. And one of those visits that I got to have was to a district down south where they were incorporating a leadership model with their students. And their students were doing goal setting and charting goals and from all ages, and also learning, they called them student ambassador skills, which are what we would typically call the soft skills today. And then when we flash forward to my leaving the commissionership and coming back to my roots in district, I was in the Mount Olive Township School District as we moved through the pandemic. And our superintendent really had an incredible vision to have personalized learning plans for every student. This was something we had been talking about and working towards pre-pandemic, but we actually went ahead and implemented it in the middle of the pandemic. And it wound up being a really rich resource. Of course, as you begin to implement with anything, you have to go in baby steps. But what we did is we had the teacher, the parent, and the child, all, or student of whatever age. We did it pre-K, or sorry, we did it kindergarten through grade 12, each setting 3 goals. And so while academic goals are important, we also know that we have to be thinking about the whole child. And so they set an academic goal. They set a social emotional learning goal, and then they also set a career goal. And you may be thinking, you know, how is a first grader or second grader setting a career goal? And it really wasn't necessarily like, this is what I'm going to be, but this is what I'd like to learn about, or a job that I'm interested in. And then it could go all the way up into some of our older students really setting goals around courses they wanted to take towards a career they're interested in, or a skill that they wanted to learn, or an activity they wanted to participate in. And so when you bring these 3 goals together, we're really addressing how the whole child develops. We're doing this in tandem as a partnership. So the students, the older students started the goal setting themselves, and then teachers and parents weighed in. The younger children, the teachers worked with them first, and then they went home to parents to, you know, think about other ways that they might support this. And so you had full community involvement here, wrapping all arms around children and working with them across the course of the year towards these 3 goals. So it was really an incredible experience. I do highly recommend, while it is an enormous lift to think how you're going to have a personalized learning plan for every child, just taking a step in the beginning directions for districts who are out there listening. You know, put together a committee of stakeholders who are going to think about how you might explore this. Then thinking about how many goals might this be. For us, 3 seemed realistic, 1 goal in each area, and recognize that it's not going to be perfect the first year, but that when we invite children into the conversations about their education, amazing things happen. So that was our experience.
Incredible, Kimberly. And I love, you know, just what a multifaceted approach, as you were saying, that the whole child approach, and, you know, the just intentionality of bringing families in and allowing, you know, that those lines of communication to be opened, and children to be able to see kind of the purpose of the work they're doing and the value of the family and the teacher. What incredible work you are leading. Thank you so much. Again, I wanted to remind everyone, if you have questions, please, you know, feel free to drop them in the chat. We would love to answer any of your questions for the panelists at the end. So Shafan, in this same vein of talking about personalized support, I know you're doing great work around tutoring as an evidence-based practice to provide personalized support. How do your tutors provide that more personalized learning experience at Great Oaks?
Sure. First, I'll start by saying an essential design of our school is our tutorial model. So it's small group, high dosage tutoring in math and ELA, and it's specifically for all students in grades 3 through 10. And that is through the federal funding, through AmeriCorps. And so we have AmeriCorps fellows that we recruit every year. And so each year, you know, when we started with one school, it was about 25 fellows, and now we're up to recruiting over 100 fellows a year at 7 schools. And so it's a pretty big deal. And so before I talk a little bit about the personalized support, I do want to talk a little bit about like what contributes to the success of the fellowship that to me determines the experience our students have. And so the first thing I'll say is our program is not this typical after school, you know, this separate entity that comes in to support students. Our tutorial is built into the school day. And so, for example, if students, let's say, will have math class first period, that second period, they may be in math tutorial. And so they're breaking down the same concepts they learned from their math class now in tutorial with their fellow. And so it's like really seeing magic happen right before your eyes. And so students have more at-bats with the content, they're asking more questions. And now you have someone kind of following, do you really understand what you're doing? And so now we get to break down by asking more check for understanding questions. And so it's actually such a beauty to see in action. And so I also say that we put a lot of stock in training and developing our fellows. And so when they on board with us late July, we do a lot of training and development that carries over throughout the school year. And so that's content training, that is a lot of training in like, what does it mean to deliver instruction in math and ELA, training around school culture, what does it mean to build relationships with students? What does it mean to be a professional? Because many of our fellows, this is their first time working in education. And so we do a lot of community building with our teachers and fellows. We do a lot of training around family engagement because our fellows are the ones primarily making that phone call each week. And so we really do value the relationship our fellows develop with parents. And it's, like I said, it's rooted in trust. And so we do a lot of training and development around that. And just like teachers, we've developed an observation and feedback cycle. And so our fellows are getting observed and provided with feedback regularly, just like our teachers. And so we have a rubric that we follow. And by the end of the year, it's amazing to just see our fellows grow from like, I don't know what it means to work in education to now being kind of like these masters and tutoring. A major benefit to our school is this pipeline that we've developed. So many of our fellows stay on board to teach, to take on other roles. And so about 30% of our full-time staff, they've been former fellows, and it's just such an added bonus to our school to continue the work. And when I think about personalized learning, it's the true differentiation that happens during the tutorial block. And so, for example, one student may be working on skills they did not master. When we go back and look at the previous day's exit ticket, that student may have to go back and get some more support on that particular skill, while the student right next to them may have mastered that. And now they're on this accelerated track and they're working on higher level math problems. And so we really rely on this fellowship model to differentiate instruction in a really special way. And I love that Kimberly talked about goal setting because, we used to say, you are a tutor, and we had to change that to, no, you're a fellow, because the experience that our fellows are providing and contributing to the school is not limited to the word tutor. They are calling parents, they're facilitating goal setting sessions, they're following their scholars for the entire school year. So they get to see the growth with their students. They're staying on for many years later. And so we truly believe that with this experience and the training that we're providing, our fellows are making a huge impact on the environment in our schools, particularly the academic achievement of our students. We also use programs like IXL, Dreambox, iReady, and Zern. And so, those online platforms definitely provide personalized pathways. And, we do a lot of data analysis to determine what are the best things to do next when we think about skills. And so with our fellowship in the online programs, we're doing a lot of personalized instruction and learning.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you can, I think you made a great point around it just being so much more than a tutor, so much thought behind connecting, to the content and having another professional to be reteaching content to students and explaining it in a new and different way. And the training that goes on that you've been thoughtful about, and the observation and feedback and using data to drive instructional decisions. You can tell how much goes into making such a successful program, Chiffon. Thank you so much for laying that out for us. So building on sort of some of these examples of personalized learning, I know social emotional support is something that is definitely on everyone's mind over the course of these past 2 years. So Jennifer, we'd love to hear from you and how Collingswood School District is using, in the same vein that Chiffon said, data to provide SEL supports in a very personalized way in Collingswood.
So thank you, Chelsea, for having me, and hello to everyone joining us. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. In Collingswood, I'd like to think we are a little ahead of the curve with our SEL initiatives and beliefs that not only should we, change the mindset of our students, our staff, and our families as far as SEL goes, but to really embed it in everything that we're doing across the board. So we did start creating a personalized curriculum. Phase 1 was grades K through 5. So the elementary curriculum writers worked together, collaborated throughout the CAR framework. to really set up a curriculum following the New Jersey social emotional competencies based on what our community needs. Phase 2, at this point we are, grades K through 12 now have the curriculum. The curriculum starts with every child, K through 12, starting their day with a daily check-in. It's a very quick 5-question survey that all teachers that have, connections with the kid throughout the day will have access to the results. And it really puts the child in the mindset of, how am I doing today? Identifying if they need extra supports on their own. So really looking at that tiered model as far as the child goes, who needs help, who wants to talk to a teacher, who's having a great day, who's struggling. So it really gives the teachers the flexibility to shift their morning meetings, shift whatever they're doing throughout the day based on their child's needs. And like I said, all staff members who have access to the child throughout the day has that information. The questions are quick. They are geared towards the age level. So the kindergartners have a lot of graphics on their pictures, which emotions they're feeling, up until seniors in high school who have more of an open-ended response of, why they would like to talk to a staff member. We also had last year during the pandemic, during remote instruction, we had a slew of teachers teaching SEL to the children in addition to the morning meetings. We also had our counseling coordinator and her interns really utilize the engagement that we're all finding that the technology is actually helping us with. Because like we said, a parent has a 15-minute break at work, they're easily accessible when we're Zoom meeting them and not necessarily calling them in for a conference. So that really was something that's really beneficial as far as giving the children and the families the support they needed when we were addressing it with the data from the check-ins, with the observations throughout the day across the board with all the teachers involved. We had small social groups, which were outside of the school hours or within the school day based on the child's needs. They were in grade level bands. And like I said, the school counselor coordinator and her interns worked on them. We're really looking forward to shifting that all back, to a combination of having it remote when needed and in person with these students, and really collecting the data to show that they are growing. Not only are they growing within, this realm, but it's really helping their acceleration through all, academic portions of their day. And it is important, to get started. Something simple like the check-in, something simple like the professional development that we've been providing our staff from the beginning, including every instructional assistant, every, special area teacher, whether you're music, PE, art, for everyone to be on the same page and, really understand the goals of the district, understand the beliefs, and most importantly, understand the language that the students are being taught throughout the day, so they can all make the connections with the kids and all be in, an equal importance and impact with the child's education. And when we do identify that support, we need to take it to the next tier. We have more than 1 or 2 adults on board with them. So we look forward to seeing how it's going to continue.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love the intentionality around including so many different people in the community, in your school community. Oftentimes, it's the bus driver or the secretary who's the first person that child that says good morning to that child for the day, if they're getting themselves to school. And so incredible that they're really speaking the same language and all feeling a part of that child's well-being. And I also love, starting with those standards and even using formative assessment to check in to see how students are growing. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for explaining that to us and what's happening in Collingswood. Jamila, I'd love to pivot to you as a parent advocate. You're hearing all of these great best practices that are happening across the state. We know that New Jersey districts are receiving $4.3 billion in federal funds, and a requirement of the funding is involving families in these conversations. We'd love to hear about your experience about how families are getting information about these evidence-based practices, about whether these are being, successfully implemented in their schools. And then, what are parents, how can they advocate for some of these best practices that we're hearing today to be happening in their local schools?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And it's so encouraging to hear from all of these educators today about the best practices that they're implementing in their schools. to really hear a student voice and also to include, what families feel they need for their students. So what we're seeing throughout New Jersey is kind of like a yes and no, as far as if information regarding best practices and evidence-based practices are being made available to families. So what we're hearing from our families is that the information is being made available, but it's not always easily accessible. And schools can support parents' access to information by making it easier for them to find. They can send out all-call phone calls. They can do all-call text messages. When it comes to school websites, having that information accessible right from the home page, that's something that's really good for families because it makes it very easy for you to find. We find that when information is hard to find, then families get really discouraged. And when we ask parents about if those evidence-based practices are being implemented at schools, we see that many schools are implementing some of those evidence-based practices, but it's not always happening in a way that serves that particular school community well. And we believe that's because many families have not been included in those decisions being made about how the funding is actually used. In a recent survey by the National Parents Union, they asked parents if they were included in the decisions about how those funds were being used. And more than 60% of families, not only from New Jersey, but across the country, said that they were not included in that decision-making. And more than 10% were unsure, which means that the information wasn't being made clear to them. So parents can actually support accelerated learning and also, gain access to this information by doing a number of things. As an individual, relationship building with your teachers and your school leaders, gives you easy access to that information, ask questions. And then on a larger level, if your school has a parent association, if they have a PTA, a PTO, and if they're affiliated with different parent networks, such as the National Parents Union and Parent Impact, they can get access to that information. Many of these networks conduct surveys. Families can actually give insight to their school communities by participating in these surveys, also by having their children participate in these surveys. And we can actually, if your school doesn't have a formal group, this is a great time to go ahead and form that. What we found out throughout this past 18 months is that school boards can have virtual options. Parent meetings can have a virtual option. And so taking advantage of things like Zoom meetings to organize parents within your school, within your community, if your school is part of a network, within that network, you can get together, you can discuss ways to obtain information, you can ask questions, you can invite educators to join in on those meetings so that you can get answers to those questions. And then as a parent group, you can design a plan for holding your school leadership accountable. You can host town halls yourself, and you can actually go to websites like the JerseyCAN website, and as I mentioned, the Parent Impact and National Parents Union websites to access toolkits and get resources. JerseyCAN has the website that you guys just showed before, which has a great list of questions that can help set you up for obtaining information about what best practices are being used. And so just as a parent community, you can ask your schools to kind of set mile markers for progress so that you can see if the evidence-based practices that they're implementing, you can set mile markers to see if there's actually any progress, and you can ask them for transparency when there's a lack of progress. That way, it can be an ongoing thing where parents are adding insight and contributing, to practices that are being implemented throughout the year. So just in a nutshell, parents really have to ask the questions to their school communities, to their school leaders about where to access that information, share that out with other parents, participate in polls, and give your insights as well as hold your school communities and your school boards accountable for how those funds are being spent, because your voices and your student voices should be included in funds that are spent for education, where our children are the end user of the education system.
Thank you so much. That was so powerful. I agree. Yeah, making that information easy to access is so important, and how they know how to get there. And I really appreciated your point too around using technology, right? So we have all of these new skill sets, board meetings, parent meetings, like ensuring that that parents, have easy access, not only to information, but also to those meetings, and that important information that's shared at board meetings, and the contacts with teachers. I know Dr. Mills, to connect with what you're saying, Dr. Mills talked about parent university. So when parents, don't feel like they have skill sets to support their children, being able to provide them, with the support in doing that. And Chiffon talked about those frequent touch points, using technology to kind of have those frequent touch points. Kimberly talked about in individual learning plans, bringing families in to really ensure that they know and have a voice in those individual learning plans. Thank you so much. Thank you, for your honest, and I think, you gave not only an honest answer, but also you came with solutions and suggestions that I think that we can all learn from. So thank you, Jamala, so much. Dr. Mills, I'm going to send you the last question before we open it up to Q&A. So just one last quick reminder, if you have any questions, follow-up questions for any of the panelists, please make sure you drop them in the chat. I'll make sure I get to as many as I can. But Dr. Mills, I love, in this topic of using federal funds and engaging families and educators, how have you and your team used federal funds to intentionally and invest in your educators? And how did you support educators in other ways too?
Chelsea, that's a great question. As everyone shared, I heard a lot about what we've been doing for families, what we've been doing for students. And I think that we have not necessarily talked about the way we're caring for educators, because a lot of the work that's happening, the way in which students are actually being maintained and or improving throughout the pandemic has been due to educators and the way in which they've shown up for young people. And I think during the pandemic, everyone was really afraid of what was to come. So to have educators come out their homes, enter school buildings, and be willing to educate students in person with a mask and social distance and learn about all of the rules and regulations of COVID, I thought that it was appropriate that we figure out ways in which to leverage these federal funds to do our best to try and offer some sort of equity, right? And so we know that teachers is a passion-driven job versus a monetary-driven job. So you can never, give them enough to bring about the dedication that they demonstrate every day. But when we think about, what it looks like for teachers in summer months, what it looks like for after-school tutoring, we wanted to incentivize them as best as we can to essentially show our thanks for them continuously showing up after hours and during summer months by increasing pay. And so when we think about per diem rates across the state, the average is typically around between $36 and $40. And so what we wanted to do with our teachers is offer them higher rates of $50 an hour in an effort to demonstrate that, hey, this is the least we can do when you all are coming in to risk your lives for the families that you service, and understand that they need you equally as much as your own. And so what we were able to do was leverage some of those dollars to offer higher pay rates and then get teachers in more consistently to mitigate the student to teacher ratio and really give that one-on-one feel as much as we possibly can. This also supported our Saturday Academy. It also supports our current tutoring program, which is actually happening right now. So if the loudspeaker goes off, it's because students are exiting the building in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I think that's in a nutshell what we've been trying to do, is to just make sure that teachers aren't left out, are forgotten about, or their health and well-being isn't forgotten about in this process.
What about, I know you've done some innovative thinking around scheduling too. So not only around those higher pay pieces, but also scheduling. I'd love to hear you talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, no, so I'm glad you asked. So when we think about the schedule, we knew that teachers were going to work extremely long days, coming in at 7:30, leaving at 4 o'clock. We wanted to mitigate the schedule to create time, because in the virtual world and even the hybrid space, there is a lot of planning that needs to occur for different kinds of lessons, depending on where you're offering it, whether it's in person or online. And so we ended up truncating the day to end at 2 o'clock and giving teachers those 2 hours back to actually plan and do what it is that they needed to do in order to get started for the next day or even plan for weeks to come. That also created an opportunity for teachers who maybe have done their planning between 2 and 3, and also we're going to pick up an opportunity to support students from 4 to 6 or from 5 to 7, even to actually leave the school, travel back home, get situated, and be able to do it the rest of their work virtually. So these are the kinds of things that we were thinking about, because we understand that if you work a teacher from sun up to sundown, and then you're saying do it virtually, do it in person, and also be aware of all of the restrictions that are being imposed on us due to the pandemic, then we want to try and create space for you to actually have the freedom to really just think through what it is that you have to do in order to actually get students to a state of mastery in a situation where learning loss is prevailing in many of the grade levels. So
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open it up to taking I think we have time for a couple questions from our Q&A. I think, Kimberly, the first one looks like it's directed toward you. Someone asked, if you want a personalized learning plan for your child, what should you do?
Great. So I think, and I think Jamila spoke beautifully to this about some of the steps that parents can take to be involved. So a personalized learning plan is not like an individualized education plan that exists for children who have who have learning disabilities or who need that extra plan, and it's required by law. A personalized learning plan is something that's sort of decided upon by the school district. So what I would highly recommend is, again, that partnership piece of having a conversation with the principal of your child's school district to ask if they've considered having personalized learning plans for children and what that might look like. And again, opening a conversation, because it is something that, I think evolves over time from the leadership and reaching out and doing this, as I said, in partnership with community members. So that would be my recommendation, was that you can be a conversation opener and asking about if it's something that's been considered, or if there might be a way that it could be something that's put up for a conversation in a parent university, or a format where people can come together to talk about what it would take to put something like that in place. Great question. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll just open it up to the panel who wants to add to anything. Okay. Okay. The second one, I think anyone could probably take this one because many of you have served in the school leadership role. And as parents, I think this one can kind of apply to all of you. But so how can a parent not be labeled as a helicopter parent if they want to be involved, right? So wanting to have more of a say, I guess, in, things around curriculum, or just kind of wanting to be more involved, but not being kind of looked at as a helicopter parent negatively.
I'll go ahead and jump in.
Great. Thank you, Jamila.
I say, who cares? Who cares if you're labeled? You are your child's best advocate until you have taught and your child is able to advocate for themselves. And so I have definitely been that parent who walks into a building and they're like, oh, there's Miss Muhammad again, what's she up to? And I'm very well aware that, throughout my daughter's school career, that has been the opinion sometimes, but we can't let negative opinions keep us from getting the work done. But if it is a concern to you, you know, what others think of you, I think a good way to kind of mitigate that is through relationship building. Develop a relationship, get to know the person that's at the front desk in your child's school, get to know your child's teacher. There is a resurgence of a really old tactic that I love so much, which are called the teacher letters and the parent letters. And these are the letters that we write to teachers so that they can know, have a little bit of insight on our child before, just before the school year begins. And also teachers write letters to parents sometimes so that they can know who they are and how to work with them throughout the year. I think that's also a good way so that people just know right off the top that your intentions are good. You're not there to kind of, you know, knock the school down. You're there to support your child and you know, other students. So I think that relationship building is the best way to kind of get rid of that negative stereotype about the helicopter parent.
Great. Thank you. So for those the schools, some of you have talked about using stipends to support some of the work that you're doing now. There's a question around how stipends will be sustained in the future. Does anyone want to speak to that?
I can jump in. I know I spoke a bit about it. I think that sustainability is predicated upon need, right? And so a lot of the driving force to incentivize participation and offer, you know, a greater amount of dollars for our staff is predicated upon the situation that we're in. And so I do think in some instances, sustainability will exist. We'll still have Title I funding when our ESSER is no longer with us. We'll still be receiving federal dollars, our grants and things like that, that will support the sustainability of higher per diem rates. It may not exist in every program in every facet, but I think that there are pockets where this will continue because learning loss won't go away, even though the money will no longer exist. And so I think by leveraging our general fund, our state funding, coupled with our federal dollars, that there is a happy median where teachers don't feel like they're losing out because the pandemic is now gone, that they still feel that they're accommodated appropriately for the work that they're doing. So I don't want to say sustain because we know that things will change, but I definitely want to say an equitable disbursement of dollars will exist post the ARP ESSER funds that we're currently receiving.
Thank you. Here's one. Are there any positive trends that you've noticed that have evolved as a result of the hybrid or remote model of learning that occurred during the pandemic? So I know we've talked a lot about, I think parent, you know, the increase of parent engagement opportunities, but any other positive trends that you've noticed that have evolved as the result of hybrid or remote models of learning?
I can definitely jump in. I definitely would say this increased use of technology in the classroom, and whether it's having more time with students on computers, unlike what we used to do pre-pandemic. I think it's such an advantage for our students to be well versed in technology. I think in the back of our heads, we're just like, we don't know what to expect. So instead of like, wow, what are we going to do? And we have to kind of go back to this remote world, we have a plan ready to go. And so I think just being flexible and being able to adjust, I think particularly about like some of the small group work that we've been able to do. It's like, hey, don't worry about it. I know we don't have a classroom for everyone, but guess what? Open up your laptops and we can do some small group tutoring over Zoom. And so I think it's given us way more creativity, more FaceTime. You know, we talked about the parents, but also creative ways to support students and kind of closing those gaps.
Excellent. Thanks, Chiffon. There's a question, how does your district share information about how students are doing academically?
Okay, I'll jump in. In terms of sharing with families or sharing with internally? Well, we'll talk about both, right? So externally, our students, in the absence of NJSLA, and it being standardized and being able to, of course, share and grab the report cards and do it in those things, the internal assessments that we use, each time a student takes it, it generates an individual student report. And so when the cycle ends and report cards come out, we attach that data so that that families can actually see where their students stack up in the control group of our schools, and then like the national group of schools across the country is taking the exact same norm test. And so they can see if they are basically on pathway to college, if they have low risk, if they have high risk, or, we need certain kinds of intervention immediately. And so that's one way we're sharing data with our families. Also, the families have access to our Power School Parent Portal, where they can see grades instantaneously as teachers update them. So we do our updating on a weekly basis. So as parents go in, they can see what the actual grade average is and begin to have those conversations with the families as needed. And then when we look internally and we talk about what staff is receiving, they have, of course, access to that FastBridge data that we are ultimately sharing with parents. We also have a system called EduClimber, where it shores up all of the data from SAT to ACT to past NJSLA scores to traditional teacher grades, attendance, all in one place. And it actually helps us begin to tier students to promote our RTI strategies to get students to where they need to be. And so the system is robust, but the data really crunches it down to a composite. So you can see where a student ultimately is holistically, and not just, in one class or based on their attendance. So those are
great. Yeah, that's amazing. And what great conversations, as you were saying, as it's all in one place to start to see if teachers' grades are aligned. And that it's not just, a snapshot. As we know, one test, not a snapshot in time, but also looking at attendance and all of those great data points. What a great holistic view of the student. Thank you. Jennifer, anything, I know working as a district leader, you talked a lot about SEL and the data points, anything else to sort of add around the way the district is sharing about how students are doing academically, or even around the SEL pieces that you discussed? So like sharing that data back with families.
Yeah, so I think that the pandemic, one of the silver linings is just like we've been talking about, the engagement with families, and really looking at the families at where they are and really connecting, the best ways for the families versus, this is how you contact me and that's it. So I feel, especially at the elementary level, a lot of the communication between the families and the teachers has just, exploded over the last year. And within the school, we have dedicated times for PLCs once every 6 days for the elementary, and during department meetings for the upper levels. To really go through the data, to really collect the data, align, what you're seeing in your classroom across the district, and to better communicate that out, our goals and our results, and stepping forward with the parents.
Great, thank you so much. Any final words from anyone from the panel before, in this last minute, we sort of wrap it up? Anything that's been on your mind that you wanted to add? Thank you so much. I just wanted to, say thank you. So thank you to JerseyCAN for hosting this, for the commitment to sharing, what's working across the state regarding education. The webinar showcased just a sample of ideas and perspectives. And I hope that they'll help, those of you here on this webinar today in your communities. If you have any questions outlined in the webinar, if you have any idea or experience, please, feel free to reach out to JerseyCAN. I know they're going to drop some information in the chat for how you can do that. If you're an educator, please take a look at the online platform, the case studies. We're definitely, at JerseyCAN happy to connect you with the districts. And if you're a parent, please see, the resources on that microsite. I just wanted to thank again so much the panel for being here today. Thank you for the work you're doing every single day with kids across the state. We really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for being on here tonight.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. It was terrific. Thank you.